Ministerial statement, Luke Pollard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to update the House on the ongoing review of the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy Scheme applications from former members of Afghan Specialist Units, including former members of Commando Force 333 and Afghan Task Force 444, commonly known as the Triples. These Afghans worked alongside UK armed forces in Afghanistan, fighting valiantly and some dying alongside our troops. It is for this reason that I know former Triples have the support of veterans of the conflict and the British public, as well as members of this House on both sides. In opposition, the Defence Secretary and I, along with my honourable friend the Security Minister, as well as many sitting and former members of this House, again on a cross-party basis, advocated for a review made on ARIP applications from the Triples. I pay tribute to my honourable friend the Security Minister, those former and sitting members of Parliament, and I'm keenly aware that an update on the Triples review is long overdue. I thank colleagues for their patience. Although the review, which should not have been necessary in the first place, has taken longer than initially intended, I can confirm today that key issues have been identified and resolved, and this government is now making important progress with eligible Triples and their families now being invited to relocate to the UK. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Triples review was announced by the previous government on the 1st of February in response to the urgent question I tabled after it accepted that inconsistencies existed in how decisions on ARIP applications for members of the Triples were being made. For clarity, officials are currently reviewing a cohort of ineligible decisions taken on applications containing credible evidence of links to former Afghan specialist units where MOD caseworkers previously referred cases to officers in other parts of the MOD, other government departments and governmental bodies under Category 4 of the ARIP scheme, and which may have been affected by this inconsistent approach. The review is being carried out by staff who have not previously worked on these applications, and this includes independent caseworkers. Approximately 2,000 such applications are within scope of the review, and I can report that more than 3/4 have been so far reassessed. The previous government committed to conclude the review within 12 weeks from launch, which was at the end of March. That review should have reported before the general election, but clearly it did not. Given the perilous situation in which many former Triples still find themselves, this is a source of deep regret and concern for me, which I know many members will share. I've investigated the reasons for the delay, which includes the emergence of additional information in HMG archives that officials undertaking the review have discovered and that required careful consideration. Madam Deputy Speaker, the nature of the relationship between the UK government and the Triples evolved over almost 20 years of UK military involvement in Afghanistan. This has led to a complex set of historical records held by different government departments. It has taken time to piece this information together to give a fuller and more accurate picture. I'm now able to provide a provisional update on what we have learnt from this review. Officials have now confirmed that there is evidence of payments from the UK government to members of Afghan specialist units, including CF 333 and ATF 444, and that for some individuals, this demonstrates a direct employment relationship. This is evidence that goes beyond previously identified top-up payments and reimbursements for operational expenses, which do not demonstrate such an employment relationship in themselves. This is, of course, contrary to the position reported to Parliament by the previous government that no such evidence of direct employment existed. My officials have advised that there is some record analysis to be carried out which should give us a more confident picture of the task at hand. I am, however, satisfied that what has come to light is sufficient to move forward with decision-making without delay under ARIP Categories 1 and 2, as well as Category 4, where appropriate for the Triples. The review is still progressing, and each application is considered on its own merits. But on the information available at the moment, we are expecting an overturn rate of approximately 25%. For the benefit of the House, these categories permit ARIP eligibility to persons including those who are directly employed in Afghanistan by a UK government department or who worked in Afghanistan alongside a UK government department in partnership with or closely supporting and assisting that department who are at risk due to this work. It is the risk that is important in that. Like me, members will be understandably anxious about the impact this time delay has had on the pace at which we are able to get as many of those eligible for relocation moved to safety. Madam Deputy Speaker, many members will have concerns for the welfare of former triples who might be ARUP eligible and still remain at risk. Despite sharing their deep frustrations, I hope it is of some comfort to colleagues across the House that if a decision is overturned as part of this review, applicants are formed immediately and that the relocation process can then start. I have already begun signing eligible decisions to relocate eligible former triples to the UK, which is why this statement is necessary today. Furthermore, once they arrive in Pakistan and confirmed as ARUP eligible, we can offer them protection from deportation back to Afghanistan thanks to the UK government's ongoing and constructive dialogue with the government of Pakistan. Confirming that we have found evidence of direct employment for some of the triples is the opposite of the last government's position that no such direct employment existed. Madam Deputy Speaker, I would like to state that I have seen no evidence suggesting a conscious effort by the previous administration or any minister to cause a delay or indeed to mislead the House or the public on this matter. When ministers in the previous government provided statements to this House on the triples, I believe they did so in good faith and based upon the known information under consideration at that time. Record keeping in the context of a long and multinational operation is notoriously challenging, but that is no excuse. It is, of course, critical we understand how and why these errors occurred. It is clear to me that a failure to access and share the right digital records and challenges with information flows across departmental lines have all led to this significant body of information with huge real-world implications being overlooked. Where corporate memory failed, so did processes, as is all too often the case. It is those who need the help the most that suffered. I'm clear that this sort of systems failure is not good enough. Under my direction, officials will now review and renew efforts to improve information flows and processes to ensure this never happens again. While I do not consider there to be malicious intent in this case, this is an example of the problems that have dogged the Afghan resettlement scheme under the previous government. The triples review should not have been needed in the first place. It should not have taken this long, and the system in place at the time the initial decisions were made should have been led with more competence and grip to ensure these mistakes were caught and managed more quickly. But today, it is with some relief that I, as part of this new government, and as someone who championed the case for the triples when in opposition, can assure members that we have unblocked progress and that eligible former triples and their families will now rightfully receive the sanctuary that their work in support of our troops in Afghanistan deserves. I'm confident that we'll be able to relocate those eligible to safety and to start a new life here in the UK. We will keep pushing forward this work at pace so we can close this chapter in our history, knowing that we did right by those who stood shoulder to shoulder with UK armed forces in Afghanistan. I recognise the strong sense of feeling and support across the House on this matter and in Afghan resettlement in general. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Defence Secretary and I will keep the House updated on our approach to Afghan resettlement and give seriousness, and given the seriousness we take the triples review in the MOD, I aim to report to the House when this review is complete. Thank you.
I call Shadow Minister Andrew Bowie.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to, of course, thank the Minister for advance citement of his statement today and also for the tone of the statement before the House this afternoon. The debt of gratitude that we owe all of those who bravely served for, with or alongside our armed forces in support of our mission in Afghanistan is so great that words cannot really do it justice. They worked at great personal risk to make Afghanistan a better place. It is right that we supported them and indeed continue to support them now. I am proud that in addition to Operation Pitting, where we evacuated 15,000 people from Afghanistan in 2021, the previous government established the Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme and the Afghan Relocations and Assistance Policy. And I welcome that as of 30th June this year, indefinite leave to remain had been granted to 12,874 individuals across both schemes. Indeed, the House will be aware that there are many former Afghan Specialist Unit members who have safely relocated to the UK, along with their families, through the ARUP scheme. But I acknowledge that the issues relating to application from a cohort of members of the triples do exist. And as this House is aware, a review was announced in February by the then Minister for the Armed Forces, the former member for Wells, my right honourable friend James Heapy. Rightly, the Ministry of Defence has been reviewing ineligible decisions made against applications from the Triples and other specialist units with an eye to any instances of inconsistency. It is important that this work is done thoroughly and indeed with great care. And I welcome the Minister's update to the House today on the work of that review process. And I also commend him for his courtesy in coming to the House in person to make the statement. I have listened very carefully to what the Minister has had to say about the new information, including evidence that builds a picture of direct employment by the UK Government for some Triples, and about the overturning of decisions, including the rate of overturning. And on these benches, we of course support this review process, initiated by James Heapy, completing successfully, and we absolutely want the correct decisions made on these very important and highly sensitive applications as speedily and as fairly as possible. And we hope to receive further updates from His Majesty's Government in the time ahead. If I may ask the Minister a specific question, what course of action will he take for the applications of Triples where no evidence of employment is found? And more broadly, I think the House would also welcome an update on the flow of those potentially eligible for ARAP from Afghanistan to Pakistan and from Pakistan to the United Kingdom. And on that, the Honourable Gentleman outline what conversations he has had with the Pakistan authorities to ensure that ARAP-eligible Afghan Special Forces personnel are not being evicted from their country. As ever, we also want the Government to ensure that those who arrive through the scheme receive the support that they need so that they can begin successfully rebuilding their lives in the United Kingdom. So on that, what will the impact be on housing stock for ARAP applicants of the decision announced today? Finally, we reiterate our call for the human rights of all Afghans to be protected, for the monitoring and documenting of discrimination and abuses committed by the Taliban, and we again strongly condemn the Taliban's attacks on the rights of women and girls. The international community must continue to press the Taliban to reverse course.
Minister.
Can I thank the Shadow Minister for his support for this review and support for the Triples in general. Those people who served alongside our forces are owed a debt of gratitude by those who, by all those in the UK, and it is good that there is cross-party support for the Triples and for the contribution they made in support of our mission to Afghanistan. In relation to the question that he has said, there is a review, there is an ongoing application process for ARAP where people can apply to ARAP and their eligibility is checked. It is entirely possible that someone can qualify while still not having direct employment, but that is subject to the case-by-case basis that is taken on the individual applicant itself. So this review today and the update I'm presenting does not mean that all Triples are eligible, nor does it mean that no Triples are eligible. What it means is where the direct employment relationship has been established, we will now proceed, they'll take forward their applications, whereas previously those applications were refused. We will continue to work with the government of Pakistan, and we're grateful for their work and support in facilitating the flow of individuals, eligible persons from Afghanistan to Pakistan and then onwards to the United Kingdom. It is important that we continue that flow, so people who are currently at risk from the Taliban, and it is important that we stress they are at risk because of the Taliban's actions here, have the ability to get to sanctuary, and we're doing so at a reasonable pace to make sure that the entire flow can be delivered properly and sensibly. In relation to the comment about rebuilding lives, I'm grateful that he said that, because I think there is enormous support from all parties here for the Afghans who put their lives on risk to support our troops, to be settled in the UK and to start a new life. And I'm grateful for members on both sides who have supported efforts in their own constituency to do so. We are working as a new government, across government, working with colleagues in MHCLG and the Home Office in relation to this. We'll have further announcements where we can do around transitional accommodation to make sure the flow is appropriate through the United Kingdom. And there will be some members of Parliament who will have transitional accommodation in their own constituencies that I'm very happy speaking to in relation to making sure their integration and that flow is as smooth as possible. And can I echo the words of the Shadow Minister in relation to the appalling atrocities of the Taliban, not just in the attacks on rights of women and girls in Afghanistan, but in the way that they are pursuing and in many cases deliberately attacking those people who served alongside coalition forces in Afghanistan. It is the actions of the Taliban that puts at risk those people who try to rebuild their own country, who try to work for a better Afghanistan alongside our troops, and that is why this ARAP scheme is so important and is one that enjoys cross-party support and will continue to do so. Thank you.
The Chair of the Select Committee, Singh Dhesi.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I welcome this statement from my honourable friend, the Defence Minister, who himself was a staunch advocate for the triples when in opposition. But we should never have actually needed this review, because those individuals bravely supported us when we needed their assistance for the betterment of Afghanistan. But can the Minister advise, will a member of the triples whose case was previously rejected under the Arab scheme be aware that their case is under review, and how will the department and the government go about making contact with those individuals?
I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman's support for Arab and for the Afghans involved. As part of the Afghan Triples review, 2,000 or so cases are under consideration. Where we discover that there has been a negative decision made that should be overturned, we're contacting those individuals immediately. But this does not mean that all triples are eligible, nor does it mean that everyone who served as part of the Afghan National Army in support of their mission are eligible for relocation to the UK. Additional routes are available via the Home Office, but in very particular sense of the triples, we're aimed to conclude this review at pace, contacting all those individuals who we now deem to be eligible based on the new evidence that we have found. There's still some work to be done, and in a number of cases, the most complex cases are still to be delivered. So he will understand that I can't put a timetable on when that review will complete, but we've made sorting out the Arab scheme one of our early priorities as a department, and will continue to deliver those changes that we need to make sure that we can have confidence that all those decisions in relation to triples are the right decisions that have been made.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Helen Maguire.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was the late Paddy Ashdown who was one of the first to call on the UK Government to recognise that we have a moral obligation to support Afghan interpreters and others who supported us over a 20-year period by providing them with a route to resettle in the UK. And over 3 years on from our withdrawal from Afghanistan, it's troubling that for those like the triples and their families, they are still waiting for their chance to come to the UK to safety. Earlier this year, we welcomed the review of these cases, and we thank the Minister for his update today. These brave individuals put their lives on the line in support of our operations, and sadly, many are now facing threats to their lives for that reason. We must get them out and to the UK as quickly as possible. It's deeply alarming to hear the Minister's revelations about a direct employment relationship, and tragically, during this period, some of these brave Afghans have lost their lives. Perhaps they might not had this been uncovered more quickly. Can the Minister provide a figure for the number of triples estimated to have been killed over the past 3 years? Given this new evidence, does the Minister remain confident in the decision-making processes for other individuals whose Arab applications were rejected? Does he or his department plan to look at those again? And will the Minister update us on what steps he is taking to ensure that these people are not only eligible for Arab, but able to get to the UK safely? Has he spoken to his counterparts in that region to that end? And will he also look at the treatment of those who come to the UK and the Arab scheme? Will he consider widening the scope of the Armed Forces Covenant to include those who came to our aid during our operations in Afghanistan?
Minister.
I thank the honourable member for her questions, and I'm glad she raised Afghan interpreters who sit outside of the triples in relation to this. But as a constituency MP where there are a lot of Afghan interpreters in Plymouth, I know that their contribution is widely recognised and valued by the public as well. It is not possible for me to put a number on those who have lost their lives or have been persecuted by the Taliban, or their families persecuted because of their involvement with coalition forces and allied forces in Afghanistan. But it makes the reason why we called for this review so clear. This is not a administrative mess that has no consequence. This is a failure to deliver consistent standards which will have real and significant real-world implications for those people who are desperately in need of support and sanctuary. We are confident that the wider Arab scheme, although there are areas that we are improving as a new government, do not have the same problems in relation to the direct employment as the triples do in this case. Individuals are assessed on their individual circumstances, and in many cases where there is already an employment relationship with a government department, for instance, that might have been DFID or the MOD in some circumstances, that will already have been evidenced. The difficulty arises because of the specialist nature of the Triples units and establishing that direct employment relationship. We continue to have dialogue with our friends in the Pakistani government to make sure that we can continue to deliver this programme as we intend to, and as part of our further work around the Armed Forces Covenant, she may want to feed into the work ahead of the Armed Forces Bill, where we're seeking to put the Armed Forces Covenant fully into law.
Neil Coyle.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I thank the Minister for his statement and the tone and intent. But of course, it wasn't only the Triples who suffered the mistakes of the former government who capitulated to the Taliban. Will the department also be re-examining cases like that of Major General Mohammed Dawood Amin, whose case the MOD closed due to a correspondence error at their end, and despite his service to the UK, his brother Abdul Basir Jaji and I are still raising his case. He's a constituent of mine, and we're still seeking his safety here in the UK.
Minister.
I'm grateful for his question. It's hard for me to talk about individual circumstances, individual cases at the dispatch box, but I'm very happy to discuss that with him further.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd very much like to welcome the announcement by the Minister. It's absolutely the right thing to be doing. And I was very privileged to see firsthand the amazing work that 333 and 444 did side by side with British forces. Can the Minister assure the House that he'll be working closely with Pakistan government to ensure that none of these individuals are expelled or moved on from Pakistan until we're able to look at those cases? But would the Minister maybe also be able to find time to meet with myself to go through some of individual cases that are a bit too sensitive to talk about on the floor of the House?
Minister.
I'm very happy meeting the right honourable gentleman to discuss any cases that he has. In relation to the conversation with the Pakistani government, the main concern in relation to the Triples is actually moving them out of Afghanistan to Pakistan in the first place. The agreement we have with the Pakistani government means that anyone that is being assessed as part of the Arab schemes will not be deported back to Afghanistan, which is really important. But there's still the requirement to make sure that we can relocate those eligible individuals and their immediate families to the UK as part of that in an appropriate and reasonable way. We're continuing that work and we're continuing that dialogue with the Pakistani government in relation to this.
Sean Davies.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his work over many years in this respect, as my constituency, my wider borough, has played a key role in relocating a number of Afghans over many, many years. Can the Minister confirm that he's having conversations cross-government, including local government, to ensure that those who are going to be relocated to the UK are done so in a joined-up and supportive way?
Minister.
Well, can I pay tribute to all those in his constituency who are taking steps to support our Afghan friends. We do owe them a debt of gratitude. That's not just words. We need to make sure that we are living those words. I know that communities, especially those veterans of the conflict, take that responsibility very seriously, and can I reassure him that we do as well. On a cross-government basis, this new government has already looked at how we can work across departments to ensure that we are providing better value for money and a more joined-up approach, and further announcements about that will be made in due course.
Stephen Gethings.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for the statement and for the early sight of that, and I want to also thank the Minister for the attention that he's given to this, as well as paying tribute to colleagues across the Chamber for their service in Afghanistan and for those who have worked on this issue. Can I pay particular tribute to the former Member of Parliament for Glasgow South, Stuart MacDonald? He received a letter just 2 weeks before the general election, when he lost his seat and so was unable to take this up, that said that there was an error identified in a parliamentary question response on the 22nd of March 2024. That was shocking, and it said that there were ineligible decisions and assessments had been made by the Ministry of Defence. There was a bit of coverage during the election campaign that the Minister probably recalls. Will he look into that, please, as a matter of some urgency? And also, we recognise the brutality of the Taliban regime. We also recognise the value that the Afghan refugee community bring to communities the length and breadth of the UK, including Glasgow and Dundee. Can he also speak to the Home Office about how we treat Afghan refugees? Because a lot of this goes back to the way in which we have a refugee system with a presumption against rather than a presumption in favour those who are fleeing the most brutal regimes.
Minister.
Plymouth is a long way from Scotland, but I enjoyed a cross-party friendship with the gentleman that he mentioned, and I think it is important that when it comes to an issue like this, that partisan divides do not affect our work collectively. And so I'm very happy picking up the issues that he mentioned in his question.
Julia Buckley.
Thank you. Will the Minister join me in thanking our British personnel for the hard work they've done in processing the Afghan entitled personnel, such as, for example, in my Shrewsbury constituency at the Nestcliff Army Camp?
Minister.
That's brilliant. I'm happy joining her in thanking those who have made steps up here. What is apparent by when we look at the triples in particular is that there has been a real advocacy from serving and former members to highlight that there were inconsistencies in decision making in support of individuals who they knew put their lives on the line in support of our mission. That's not only those who served in Afghanistan, but there's an enormous amount of thanks I'd like to pay for those people who are supporting Afghans who relocate to the UK. And I know that there's an awful lot of good work taking place, including here in Shrewsbury as well.
Dr. Julian Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I recall that when the Minister and indeed the Security Minister were campaigning previously on behalf of the Triples, there was some doubt about the comprehensiveness of the records which would show which people had actually served in the way necessary to qualify to come to the United Kingdom. Is the Minister absolutely satisfied that there is no question of any records being withheld, for example, by special forces that would help identify eligible former members of the Triples?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful for the right honourable gentleman's question. The review has not yet completed. And as part of the review, we're looking at evidence that has been amassed across different government departments, looking at where evidence of a direct employment relationship can be established. This excludes top-up payments and operational payments, which sit outside that. When it comes to special forces, he will know that I'm unable to comment on that on the floor of the House. But let me say that all parts of HMG that kept records of that are contributing to this review. But I have to be very cautious about this because of the ongoing Afghanistan inquiry that is looking at elements of this. So I will happily pick this up separately with him.
Kevin Benavia.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome the work that my honourable friend, the Minister, did in opposition and is now putting to good use with this review. We owe in this country a special obligation to those people who are engaged with our armed forces abroad, wherever they may be, and it's really worrying about the failures that are coming to light. What lessons do you think that we can learn from those failures?
Minister.
Thank you. It's my intent that at the conclusion of the Triples review, we will be able to publish a full lessons learned summary to look at where we get to. But there's a number of them. But certainly one thing that has been reinforced in my mind is that there's enormous support for those who served alongside our troops. But what we did not see is the record keeping that matched that type of personal connection and personal thanks for those who served. That is why, as part of this work, we've instructed changes and processes within the Ministry of Defence and beyond that, in terms of how we work with other government departments and other parts of HMG, to make sure that where we are having a direct relationship with people in the future, that information is properly stored and able to be accessed.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister talks about the parallel independent inquiry on the deployment of special forces to Afghanistan between 2010 and 2013. Former members of UK Special Forces told BBC Panorama earlier this year that they believed their veto powers on applications by Afghans claiming to have served with the Triples represented a conflict of interest. This conflict of interest may not have arisen if there had been good parliamentary oversight of special forces. Will this government consider extending the scrutiny powers of the Intelligence and Security Committee so that it has oversight of UK Special Forces?
Minister.
I understand where the honourable gentleman is trying to get to with his question. It's difficult for me to comment on special forces for the reasons that he will appreciate. I'm also really keen to see the output of the Afghan inquiry to understand what lessons that Lord and Haddon Cave can identify from that, and perhaps that might be the moment where that conversation might be more appropriate, but it's not one that I can have now.
Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I do again like to praise my right honourable friend for his pursuit of justice and in regards to the Triples, not only in opposition but as he has entered power. To go back to the lessons learnt point that was just made, one of the tenets behind a number of the bills that our government has pursued in terms of the Hillsborough inquiry is the duty of candour. Can my right honourable friend provide any insight on whether this will be something that will be considered as part of the Afghan inquiry as a whole?
I'm grateful for his question. Certainly, this government has the intention to bring forward the Hillsborough Bill, and that will, I hope, enjoy cross-party support in relation to the duty of candour in particular. What we have discovered with the Triples review, and I await the final report from this, is actually a failure to organise and record properly, more than a deliberate attempt to disrupt and not share information. It is that essential plumbing that failed, but also the grip and the leadership of that programme, which is what we need to learn from to ensure that this never happens again, and that all those people who had an eligible case actually get the support and the sanctuary that they need.
Yeah. Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I understand that as a result of the ARAP programme, there will now be a new temporary centre to receive families at Beckingham Camp and Training Ranges in my constituency. This is a fairly isolated site of Nissan huts, normally used by cadets or personnel practising on the ranges. How long will the individual families be expected to stay in these Nissan huts? What money will be given to local authorities to ensure that people can be properly cared for while they're there? And how long does he anticipate this temporary centre being open before it's returned back to the military use?
I'm grateful for the honourable lady's question. In terms of the letter that I sent to the honourable lady about this one, I'm happy picking up directly outside here, but can I just reassure her that our intention is to use transitional facilities like the camp that she mentioned only on a temporary basis. I'm happy going into the details with her about how long we look to do so, but we will also be working with local authorities to make sure that the additional funding is provided to make sure that there is the correct level of funding for Afghans and their former Afghan personnel and their families while they're there on a temporary basis, and it is really important. But I know from the feedback from other locations that many communities welcome those people who are in those areas and want to support them, say thank you for the work that they did in support of our troops. But I'm very happy meeting the honourable lady to discuss that further if she would like.
Louise Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As someone who served in the conflict in Afghanistan, I know the vital work of 333 and 444 in supporting our troops. Is work currently underway to consider the other specialist troops units that supported our troops?
Can I thank her for her question, but also for her service? It is really important that on all sides of this House we have voices of those people who have served, who understand the seriousness of the consequences that we take in this place here. The Triples review at this stage is looking at the two Triples groups, 333s and 444s, but there are also other specialist units that we hope to get to as part of this review that have what we believe may have a similar direct employment relationship. I will be able to report back on that once this review has concluded.
Munira Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. A constituent of mine who served in the British forces in Kabul came to see me earlier this year about a friend of his whose application had been rejected and he had appealed. This individual was an Afghan national who was contracted by British military in the early 2000s. He worked as an interpreter, he worked with the British Embassy. I can't say much more publicly for fear of putting his safety at risk because he's already been labelled a collaborator. His father has already been tortured and murdered by the Taliban. He and his children's lives are at risk. Unfortunately, the Minister's Conservative predecessor, who I wrote to in April, did not respond to me when I asked for his personal intervention in the case. So could I ask, would the Minister meet with me to discuss this case and see what he can do?
Well, can I thank the honourable member for the way in which she approached this. I think it's a perfect illustration of why it is important that we get decisions right. It is not possible to relocate every single member that supported the UK mission in Afghanistan, but where an application has been made, there's an appeal opportunity if the decision is negative about this, but I'd be very happy meeting to discuss that with her to take that forward.
Dr Andrew Morrison.
Can I welcome the tone and the substance of the Minister's statement? Few of us thought 20 years ago we'd still be mopping up after operations Telic and Herrick. Does he agree with me that the long shadow of discretionary warfare, particularly in the civil domain, should act as a powerful incentive for any government in considering future military conflict?
Yeah, good question.
Well, I'm grateful for that question, but also his work when he was a minister in the last government as well. As part of the new government's reset, we have commissioned Lord Robertson to undertake the Strategic Defence Review that will be considering the threats that we are facing. But it is certainly true that the era where it was state on non-state actor has been certainly replaced with an era where state-on-state threats are more prominent than they have ever been, but there are still non-state threats to the United Kingdom. This creates an enormous amount of challenge, not only in the military space, but in the civil security space as well. And that's what the Defence Review will look at, as to work out what's the best shape of this, and we've invited submissions from all parties and individuals on that.
Jim Shannon.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Minister in particular? We spoke about this last week, and I appreciate that opportunity to have that chat in advance of the statement today. And also I welcome the Minister, and the last page of the statement says we did right by those that stood shoulder to shoulder with the UK Armed Forces. So on that in mind, and the Minister, who's now the Minister, but the Shadow Minister, when he was here, he and I and others in this side of the chamber, now in that side of the chamber, I have to say, we absolutely every time spoke up for those people. So with that in mind, I really welcome what's happening. It's important that a review is carried out in relation to the matter to support those who work tirelessly alongside British forces. In my time in the past, Madam Deputy Speaker, I brought to the attention of the previous Minister a guy that I met in Pakistan in September 2022. He served alongside the Afghan forces. I pursued his application on 3 occasions. I was very frustrated with the process and where it ended up. So therefore, I'm really pleased to see that today we can do something to help this gentleman. We have, Madam Deputy Speaker, the opportunity in my constituency to offer that gentleman and his family a house, a job, place in schools. It seems logical to me. If we can do all that, then we just need to make sure that the process and the data and all is done forward to bring him to the constituency of mine of Strangford. Thank you.
It wouldn't be a statement without the honourable gentleman's contribution to it, but can I thank him for the kind offer that he makes. It is important that whatever the plumbing, the process that sees relocation of those people who served alongside our forces and gave so much support to UK Armed Forces in Afghanistan, that when they are in the UK, that there is support available to them in all nations of the United Kingdom. I know that there is an enormous amount of work going on from local authority levels, from devolved administrations, to ensure that where Afghans are relocated into their area, there's proper wraparound support for them. When this review concludes, which I hope will be relatively soon, I'll be able to be in a position to announce more from that review. But in the meantime, I'm grateful for the support from all sides of this House for those people who served in support of our forces in Afghanistan. I'll report back to the House in due course.
That's the end of the statements, and I'll just give the front benches some time to change over. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day.